faith.
I think the primary crisis that faces the Christian church in its totality is division.
Along with former President Bill Clinton, they formed what they call the Celebration of a New Baptist Covenant, calling on Christians to focus on issues like poverty rather than on divisive issues like abortion and gay marriage.
We have adopted as our guidelines a gospel based on peace and justice and humility and service and love that really helps people who are in need.
Rather than?
Rather than more of a fundamentalist commitment where you define who can be and who cannot be a member of your organization.
Critics say Carter is playing political games of his own, trying to mobilize a liberal Baptist vote. He denies it. But the president, who came into office with evangelicals behind him and left with the religious right opposing him, does have hopes for the next election.
I really believe that the high power of the fundamentalist religious right in politics has reached its peak, and it has passed.
When we return, a Christian fighting to protect the Jewish state.
The sleeping giant of Christian Zionism has awakened. We are united, we are indivisible, and together we can reshape history.
Welcome to Texas, where horses, cattle, and cowboy hats are a way of life, and probably not the first place you'd expect to see this. This is a night to honor Israel, Texas style. But here's where it gets even more unusual. The people sponsoring this affair are evangelical Christians. The man in charge, Pastor John Hagee, a Christian warrior for Israel.
Send a message to America. Send a message to the enemies of Israel. Send a message to the people of Israel. Israel, you are not alone.
I believe that the Bible, the Torah, is the truth. I believe there's the Torah way and the wrong way.
And the right way, says Hagee, is to protect and defend Israel at all costs. Hagee is a Zionist, a Christian Zionist.
A Christian Zionist is someone that believes that the Bible supports Israel. God begins in the foreign policy statement of Israel in Genesis 12:3, saying, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you.
You said God's foreign policy statement?
Yes.
God has foreign policy statements?
Absolutely.
And his is pro-Israel?
Concerning the Jewish people, that's his foreign policy statement.
Hagee's devotion to Israel began in 1978 when he first visited the Jewish state.
While I was praying at the Western Wall, I turned and saw a Jewish man. He had a prayer shawl, reading the Bible, rocking back and forth, and I just felt that that man is my spiritual brother.
Hagee tried to recreate the experience in his own church in San Antonio, Texas,
Put your hands together.
where his evangelical congregation numbers nearly 20,000.
I saw Yitzhak Rabin. I met with him in Houston.
A great man.
He was a great man.
There is a hallway lined with pictures of Israeli prime ministers. And outside, Hagee's masterpiece, a replica of Jerusalem's Wailing Wall. Now, Pastor, what is going on here? We're in a Christian conservative church, and it looks like a little bit of Israel.
We sent to Israel and got all of these stones and put them in place here so that they could have the opportunity of praying at the wall as close as we could replicate it.
But this is more than just a tribute to the Jewish faith. If Israel is at the heart of God's foreign policy, Hagee wants to make sure it shapes America's foreign policy too.
There are voices in the State Department calling for the city of Jerusalem to be divided, to make way for a Palestinian capital. Let us make this clear. There shall be one Jerusalem that shall never be divided, not now and not ever.
He's got his own pro-Israel lobbying group. Their recent meeting in Washington included a written greeting from President Bush.
Thank you.
And it drew people like former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and Senators Lieberman and McCain.
If we fail in Israel, where will we succeed?
Hagee's group also went to Capitol Hill, telling members of Congress of their strong support for Israel. Their visit last year coincided with fighting between Israel and Lebanon. They made it clear what they expected America to do.
We asked them to give Israel the opportunity to respond to those people that had attacked them, not to send someone from the State Department over there to get the war stopped.
So you were pro that war?
We're never pro-war. We are for Israel having the opportunity to respond to those that attack her.
Israel can do no wrong in Hagee's eyes, and he's identified his enemy.
Allahu Akbar!
Hagee sees Iran and its defiant president as a threat to both the U.S. and Israel.
He is threatening to wipe Israel off the map. He has said that he can see a day when there will not be a United States of America. He's racing to obtain nuclear weapons, and if he obtains them, it will be the Western world's worst nightmare.
This is how Hagee thinks Iran's nuclear ambitions should be thwarted.
Well, I think America should do everything in its power to make sure that he never gets nuclear weapons, whatever that takes. If they cannot do it through diplomacy, then I think there needs to be a military preemptive strike to deny them nuclear capability.
Fighting words for a man of the cloth, but this pastor thinks war is part of God's plan. In his recent book, Jerusalem Countdown, which has sold more than 1 million copies, Hagee mixes biblical prophecy and current events and outlines a violent showdown for the end of days. In his scenario, Russia and its Arab allies invade Israel. The Antichrist appears as the head of the European Union. Armies mass, and there's a final battle at Armageddon, resulting in a sea of human blood. Before Jesus returns to slay non-believers and reign over an era of peace.
If you have not read,
It's a controversial theological stance, and critics accuse Hagee of supporting Israel and favoring war with Iran to hasten the second coming.
I can make it very clear for you. Our support of Israel has absolutely nothing to do with end times prophecy.
Some Jews have also been wary of Christian support for Israel,
you stand for the reading of the Word of God.
since many believe Jews must accept Christ in order to be saved.
The one thing that Jews and Christians disagree about is who the Messiah is.
He is the sovereign God.
We just have to agree to disagree.
Hagee does not try to convert Jews, but he's confident that when Jesus does return, the Jewish people will also recognize and accept him as their Messiah.
And as I tell the Orthodox rabbi friend here in San Antonio, that when we're both standing in the streets of Jerusalem and Messiah is coming down the road, one of us has a big theological adjustment to make. But in
Which of you is going to make the adjustment?
Oh, I think he is, of course, and of course he thinks I am. So it's going to be an exciting day.